Good evening. Welcome to our community forum as we finish our final exercise of 2 days of meeting and engaging with the 3 finalists for the Anchorage School District Superintendency Search. I am Michael Collins. I have the privilege of being president of Ray and Associates. And we have been engaged by your Board of Education to be of assistance in their excellent work as they've gone through a very extensive search process to bring you the finalists for your new leadership of the school district going forward in the 22-23 school year. It's a privilege to be with you, and we all extend our special thanks for you making the time to be with us, to hear from these outstanding educators, and then to share your impressions of each of them when we conclude. In the questioning process, I am joined by April Edie, who is a leader in Leadership Anchorage, and also is the president of the Anchorage PTA for the entire district. What we are going to do this evening is we are going to ask each of these 3 candidates to introduce themselves. We will then, for 2 or 3 minutes each, and then they will turn their attention to the questions that April and I will ask them. These questions, by the way, have come from you. So between the parent group and the community group, you have submitted 168 questions, which we tried to put together, collapse, and narrow down. So we have a total of 20 questions that we're going to ask. I actually will ask the odd questions. April will ask the even questions. And we will take it in order so that, and it's done by alphabetical, their alphabet of their last name. So in the first question, Dr. Bryant will go first, Mr. Hauser will go second, Dr. Neal will go third. In the second question, Mr. Hauser goes first, Dr. Neal goes second, Dr. Bryant goes third, et cetera, et cetera. At the conclusion, we'll remind you about how to reach and get online and fill out the impression form. And so that we have your feedback. Your feedback is critical to this. The impression form, I will tell this to you at the end again. You will click on the Anchorage School District website. You will go to the search banner. You will click on that. Under their pictures will appear, and underneath each one of them is the word comments. You will click on the comments. When you click on there, you will see a set of characteristics and criteria in a series of questions, and you will fill out your impressions, which is a ranking system for each of them individually. You will not vote for one over the other because in reality, that's a false expectation. By law, the only people in Alaska or the other 49 states in America that has a vote to select a superintendent is the Board of Education. But your impressions then will be graphed and charted by our office, given to your school board, and they will not make any decisions till they review all your impressions as they deliberate in terms of who they will select as your next educational leader. I hope that's clear. We will bring up the process again in terms of how to complete the impression forms. So now, without further ado, because you certainly want to hear from these candidates and not from Mike Collins, we're going to get started. Dr. Bryant, if you would start, and then Mr. Hauser, and then Dr. Neal, would you please take 2 to 3 minutes to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Thank you, Mike. I'm excited to be here. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Jarrett Bryant, and I work for the Houston Independent School District, which is the largest school district in Texas, and it's the 7th largest school district in the United States. So we have over 270 schools in one of the most diverse cities in America. Students in our school speak over hundreds of different languages, and we're really proud of that diversity. And 8 in 10 students are economically disadvantaged, and we're proud that we've achieved a lot for our students, particularly those who are underserved in English language learners and special education, et cetera. I currently serve as the executive officer in our Office of Talent. So that means that I'm responsible for the whole employee life cycle, from the recruitment to retention to the performance evaluation to the compensation, retention, and labor relations for what is Houston's largest public employer, which is over 26,000 full-time employees, including tens of thousands of incredible teachers. So I think a lot about what do we need to do to be competitive as a school district during this dynamic time that we're in during the pandemic. Previous to that, I served in a number of different roles. I've been an assistant superintendent since 2016, where I've overseen advanced academics, curriculum instruction, innovation, and a number of different initiatives. In that regard, I started out my career as a high school math teacher, and I started my career in Houston ISD as a college counselor.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Bryant. Mr. Hauser?
Yeah, thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. My name is Frank Hauser. I currently serve as the superintendent of the Sitka School District, and I'm a proud Alaskan. I graduated from the Mat-Su School District and the University of Alaska system. Anchorage School District has some of the most diverse schools in the nation. This large and diverse district was my home for 23 years. I've worked in nearly every neighborhood in the Anchorage School District. I started out as a teacher in the Anchorage School District and taught for a number of years, became an assistant principal and worked in a number of schools, including a K-12 open optional school, middle school, high school, and also was a director of the Music and Fine Arts Department for the Anchorage School District. Lastly, before I became the superintendent of the Sitka School District, I was the principal at Robert Service High School, a position I held for 5 years and just appreciated and loved every moment of that. I'm really honored to have been selected as one of the top 3 finalists for the superintendent position. I'm looking forward to answering your questions today and really hopefully giving you an opportunity to learn a little bit more about me, my philosophy, and the commitment that I have to the Anchorage School District. With that, thank you all very much. I'm looking forward to the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hauser. Dr. Neal.
Good evening, and thank you for hosting as well. To the Anchorage School District, Matthew Neal, Superintendent of Schools in the Woodland Park School District in Colorado. This is my, 9th year as a superintendent. I have had the great pleasure of both serving overseas as well as serving in Colorado. It is as well an honor to be considered as part of this process as a finalist. We've had an incredible week being here. My wife and I have enjoyed Anchorage. We have connected with friends, colleagues in the school district, and truly it's been a pleasure to be a part of this process. My background is in leadership and educational improvement. So I've been in Colorado, as like I said, nearly a decade, leading schools, and after that I went overseas as a superintendent. I had a brief stay as a superintendent in Wyoming, and for the last 6 years prior to this one was leading a minority majority school in the country of Kuwait. And so my own children, my family being a part of the Arabic community and learning what it meant to be in a very, very diverse community for us, learning Arabic as a second language learner, truly a tremendous experience. Prior to that, was an executive director for the Durango and the Brighton school districts, both in a Brighton district being a minority majority district with more than 60% of their students that were Hispanic, and the Durango school district, which worked closely with the Navajo and Southern Ute Native populations of students, and really learned a lot as a leader, building schools, growing schools over the last 20 years, coming into educational leadership. And so I spent a lot of time looking around this year and found that the opportunity in Anchorage was something that was for us as a family and for me as a professional is a bright and shining opportunity. And thank you for considering me.
Thank you very much. All right, question number 1. Keep in mind, gentlemen, these thoughtful questions have come from the parents and the community members of Anchorage. They are extremely good, and I will share they're very thought-provoking. So without further ado, Dr. Bryant, you go first. And the question reads, not only would you be the leader of a large administration, but also the public-facing leader setting the tone for parents, students, and the community. How do you describe your leadership style and what makes that effective?
That's such a great question. And I want to start by saying that one of the reasons why I've applied to Anchorage School District is because I'm driven by serving students in diverse communities and in urban school systems that are large and complex. That's been my entire career, and it's something that I'm very proud of. And I also have many years of experience leading large teams in a complex system. While Houston is definitely not similar to Anchorage in many ways, it is similar in the fact that we have 26,000 employees, and we serve a lot of schools and a lot of different types of neighborhoods where there are a lot of different cultures and communities and values and traditions. And I would say, first off, I lead with empathy. I love understanding different perspectives. Maybe that's just the former counselor in me, but it comes in handy when I have a lot of meetings with stakeholder groups, including teachers' unions, where we talk a lot about things like teacher pay and benefits, and how do we make sure that a place like Houston ISD is the premier destination to work and start and have your entire career. And I'm one who loves listening to the ideas of my staff and empowering them. And it's something that I both model and I've helped lead for our entire school system. Everything from initiatives that help our paraprofessionals enter the teaching profession by us paying for their tuition to go back to school, to helping our high school seniors get scholarships to go to the local university to come back and teach in their communities. I really value diversity and empowering people to succeed, and that is true in my own leadership style. As an executive for such a large system, what you'll find is that I love listening to what my team needs, what the principals in my district need, and to figure out whatever it's going to take to get us to our goals. I roll up my sleeves and I'm out there working alongside them, and I'm willing to think outside the box and to do things that are differently to achieve those goals. But I'm also one that has a high bar. My leadership style as an educator is defined by a true belief that all students can succeed, and we need to have a high bar and high expectations for all. And that's why I've spent so long in my career expanding access to advanced coursework or effective teachers in every school and really strong literacy programs so that we can achieve academic success in one of America's most diverse and complex school systems.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bryant. Mr. Hauser, I'm happy to read the question again.
Oh, I think I have the question. No, thank you very much for the offer, though. When I look at my leadership style and I focus as a superintendent, I think one of the most important things that I want to make sure that I do every single day is focus on trust and integrity. I think the superintendent needs to be trusted and needs to have the integrity when they're leading a district and setting the example for not only the district as a whole, the staff, but for the community. I think part of my leadership style focuses on collaboration, honesty, being transparent, and building relationships. I think for me, when a teacher contacts me, I want to make sure teachers know that I will do everything I can to support them in the classroom, provide them with the resources, and make sure they're doing everything they can to meet the needs of the students. From parents, I want to make sure that I work collaboratively with parents and parents so that they can contact me if they have any concerns or any issues. And I will make sure that I'll take it serious and make sure I follow through to ensure that their student is being supported and is able to find that success that every single student in the district deserves. As far as the community members, I think when we talk about honesty and transparency, the community wants to make sure that they know what's going on in the school district, and we're able to show them. We want to welcome the community members, parents into our school. And as a leader, that is one of the things that I really want to make sure that I convey to my families, to my staff, and to my students is that we are part of a community. We're working together and collaborating together on the education of our students. And so for the community, I want to make sure that they know that we are, the district is focused on being transparent, making sure that they have the information and they know that we are being good stewards of the funding that they are entrusting to the district. And for the students, for me, the students always come first. Every single day when any question I answer, it always comes back to what's best for the kids, what's best for our students. And as a superintendent, part of my leadership style, that is pretty much the question that I ask every single of my staff members when they're coming through and they have questions. You know, when we talk about programs, we talk about implementations, we talk about supports, it always comes back to what's best for our kids. Because everything we do in the district Doesn't matter what staff member you are, we need to be focused on how to best meet the needs of the students. And so my leadership style is focused around those key issues and making sure we're doing everything we can to support every single student in the district to succeed and be successful.
Thank you very much, sir. Dr. Neal, I'm happy to restate it if you would like me to.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. My style is a very collaborative and transparent style. I've been at the superintendent business for, again, nearly a decade. And I think my early on in the process, when I first started as a superintendent, learning to be transparent with families meant telling the narrative, telling the story about what kind of where we're going. I think as a seated leader right now, I spend a lot of time working with our leaders, working with our teachers, and working with our constituent groups. And as we're strategically planning, we're having the conversation with our stakeholders and our community groups. And so I'm a very transparent leader in that process. I think that helping folks walk the journey with us as we're making decisions is very important. So that really leads to that trust piece. And that really leads to the positive communication that's happening out of the superintendent's office. Really enjoy when our families are traveling that journey with us. Not all families are a part of that process, but our leaders are and our teachers are. And so really making sure that we are communicating well, we're communicating frequently. I have a blog with some of our families. I have webinars with our families to communicate well. That's part of the history that I've contributed to the districts that I've led. The second part about that is to making sure that I'm engaged and out of my office, right? It's really easy for a superintendent to get mired down into the business of the stuff. And getting out in schools, I try to stop at a school every morning and to be a part of the work, whether we're crossing guards or working with our principals and just seeing what's happening in our schools. That's very much a part of my style, developing relationally. And there's two styles of superintendent leaders, and that is the position called superintendent because I'm the boss, and then the other side of because we have a relationship. And I focus really strongly on the relational side with our leaders, with our executive staff, as well as with our principals and with our parents. And that even translates over to our businesses. I sit on the Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors and help our businesses connect with our school district. And so that relational part is very much about who I am as a leader. I'm also innovative. I have a background in leading schools as the director of strategy and innovation for Denver Public Schools, a very large system. And so when I was building schools, or we're closing schools, or we're closing to improve, I noticed through that journey, and still am today, a leader that thinks really outside the box, and to say, what do we want to be, or what can we be as we kind of grow our schools. So I spent a lot of time talking about choice, talking about opportunities for all kids. And so an earlier question today, what is the most important thing to me as an educational leader? And we'll probably hear that question tonight. It's really about student focus, making sure that each of our students along the spectrum, whether they're from a background of diversity or socioeconomic challenge, or whether they're some of our advanced students, special education students, our ELLs, they all have the ability to pursue their passions and what they want to accomplish and what their families encourage them to accomplish through our school system. So I'm very much about that choice and pathways. And I think the Anchorage School District has a tremendous pathway system for students to be able to choose your own adventure, so to speak. And I think that's very much a part of the passion of who I am. Finally, I'm a very fiscally conservative leader. I have a background in and understanding finance really well, understand the numbers and the data. I'm a data-driven leader. We had the conversation with principals last night. Dashboards and data and interpretation of data is very much a part of my work. Having conversations with our leaders so that they can interpret their own data. And then we dialogue and move forward with decisions based on the situation that we're faced as a district. I know financially we're facing a funding cliff of $65 to $75 million next year. At the same time that we've been challenged with expenditures increasing, I teased the board and
Dr. Neal, just letting you know it's time.
Thank you. I tease the board and let them know that fiscally that's an important part of this project that we have to kind of look at for the next few years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Please be reminded 2 to 3 minutes with responses. And I appreciate everybody being respectful of that.
Thank you.
April, your turn.
All right. So question number 2, is how would you rank the importance of a strong early childhood education curriculum and programming in the Anchorage School District, and why? Mr. Hauser, you're first.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Early literacy, early programs to bring students into the schools to start building that foundation, it really is essential and really key to long-term success. One of the things that we focused on in the Sitka School District is making sure that we have pre-K programs that not only are culturally responsive to our students. We have partnerships with Sitka Tribe of Alaska and the Haida Corporation to kind of come in and support the preschool program that we have there. But one of the things that we've seen is when students have the opportunity early on to have supports in the early curriculum in the early literacy, that builds that foundation for the success further on. As a high school principal, one of the things that I always advocated for was early literacy for our students in pre-K programs, kindergarten, first grade programs, making sure that we have the supports in place to build that foundation, that literacy support. And the curriculum is so essential to make sure that the curriculum is not only prescriptive, to make sure it provides that opportunity for students to have the supports that they need, addresses specific needs, but also making sure that early on they're building those foundational skills. So as they progress through their school career from pre-K through 12th grade, those foundational skills like reading and early literacy, phonics use, all those skills are there. So by the time they become high school students, like I used to as a high school principal would advocate for students and advocate for early literacy programs because we would see the benefits of that in our students. And the resources and the materials and the supports and the professional development that we put in to our pre-K programs and our early literacy programs and the curriculum that we have at that level will pay dividends later on in a student's academic career. And it is also a very cost-effective manner of working with and providing those supports. Not only does it cost more to do remediation later on in a student's career, but if we can start early on and provide those supports, not only the fact that pre-K programs have been linked to more success post-secondary education for students. I mean, all those pieces just point to a strong early literacy, early curriculum for pre-K, K, and first grade is something I absolutely support. And even as a high school principal, I was advocating for that.
Thank you, Mr. Hauser. Dr. Neal?
Thank you. I appreciate that. I've added my timer so I don't go over time this time. So sorry about the 12-second delay. Early literacy, as Mr. Hauser just indicated, is one of the greatest indicators for potential and future success. I think we as a district have a huge obligation to making sure that our families have access, culturally relevant access to early literacy programs, our preschool, even in my own district now, working with our preschool leaders to be able to scaffold instruction in a way that aligns with curriculum standards, right? So preschools can fall into a lot of different categories. Preschools can be play-based. Preschools, I've had preschools that were Montessori, and I've had really academically focused preschools. And so it's, for me as an educator and for really all of our teachers that I know that teach preschool in an academic setting, it's about moving students along a continuum of learning so that when they're in first grade and they're coming into those moments of early literacy and phonemic awareness, they're really ready and their brain is ready to engage in that. And I get the first month of school is all about socialization, and the first month of school is getting students to kind of come together, very much a part of that process. But as we move through the preschool years, making sure that students are tracking or connecting to core standards that are age appropriate and make sure we're pacing those students. And when they're not, making sure that we have interventions. We have a specialized magnet program for our special education preschool students, and making sure that we're moving, identifying through an early identification process, and that we're supporting families to help move those students into higher levels of learning. As Mr. Hauser said, our graduation rate depends, the graduating class of 2032 depends on what's happening in preschool and kindergarten. Actually, it would be 2034 with preschool. But depends on what the students are learning in preschool. And that's very much a part of our job as a district, whether it's a simple half day, a full day. And we've also looked at before and after care as an educational opportunity. So I'm a big proponent of preschool. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Neal. Dr. Brent, sorry.
Yeah, for myself, this is an issue that I would tackle with intensity and with urgency as the Anchorage superintendent. Let me give you a couple of stats. For example, only 18% of Anchorage school district kindergartners are proficient in all the standards set out by our Department of Education here in Alaska. And then when we look at third grade proficiency in reading, we're at about 40%. Meeting proficiency, which shows me as an educator that the achievement gap is widening and widening. And the only way that we're going to close our gap and meet our board goals of increasing proficiency is by investing in early childhood education as a priority, not a luxury, essential to our educational mission. There's a reason why in Anchorage there is an initiative that's being adopted statewide called Cradle to Career, because literally your path to being college, career, and life ready starts in the cradle. And early childhood education is going to be something that's very important. And of course, as we expand early childhood education, what I'm thinking about is how do we make sure that we have the most talented educators in our early childhood classrooms? And I'm proud to have launched a number of associate's degree granting high schools where our students get workforce credentials in education while they're in high school. And then they can enter directly into our school systems as teaching assistants. And then we can pay for their certifications to make sure that they're teachers in our school system within 3 to 4 years of graduation. That's how you make change happen. And that's how you put your money where your mouth is when you say something like early childhood education is important. And as superintendent, you have my commitment to make sure that early childhood education is the bedrock of our strategy for the district.
Thank you very much. Let me just take one moment. When we introduced April and Leadership Anchorage, please note that many of you do that are on this, but they took on the responsibility of engaging the community arm of the school district and held community forums. And then they also did certain kinds of small group and focus group work that actually shaped the profile along with the staff of Anchorage that built a profile that was used to actually go through the selection process to select these 3 outstanding candidates. So to April and her other leadership team of Anchorage Leadership, and for all they did, we just want to, on behalf of the board, want to pay a special thank you for extra work and real service to the Anchorage community. Now we'll get back to work, but thank you, April. Dr. Neal, your turn to go first, sir.
Please go ahead.
Okay. This is our third question. What will be your approach to student retention and reducing the dropout rate?
Thank you for that question. Both of those very, very challenging topics. And so being in schools today, talking to leaders, was in King and East and several schools yesterday, looking at attendance in a post-COVID environment. Our students they're struggling, and quite frankly, a lot of our families are struggling on what is their place and how often that we are spending time looking for our students that are actively engaged. And so whether it's at the elementary, middle, or high school, or elementary, junior high, or high school, or K-8s, a lot of our students are struggling getting to school and making sure that they're there and engaged in the learning. The conversation we had this morning is after a student is gone for 40 days, 45 days, what are we doing as a district to make sure those students are coming back and engaging? Talked about the SRO, the school resource officer, and the role of the police department and truancy court. And those are really difficult discussions. Principals right now and teachers too, they're exhausted. They're spending a lot of time getting kids back to status quo or back to stage 1, just coming to class and dropping out, and graduation rates are very much going to be and have been and will be a reflection of those. So making sure the cohort of students that are here are learning, and making sure that we're differentiating instruction and we're ability grouping students to a place where they're progressing along a continuum of learning, but also making sure that we are addressing the social, emotional, mental health, social structure needs of our community. We have many families that when asked to bring their kid back to school or bring their child back to school, they're struggling in seeing the relevancy of that because they had a period of time where maybe they were learning at home or they're maybe not as much learning as at home, and they become accustomed to that. So in the next 24 months, we have a huge task of bringing our students back into a place of learning and supporting our teachers and supporting our principals and getting the students back into the classroom. I think there is the work of working with our dropouts, make sure we're having credit recovery programs, make sure we have alternative ed programs, making sure that students have alternative pathway like our the King Center that we went to yesterday with career and tech ed. A lot of students know that they're a part of our community and engaged in our community as well as parents and families.
Thank you very much, Dr. Neal.
And
your turn.
from my perspective, I think about this from the lens of ensuring that all Anchorage students graduate college, career, and life ready. And one of the reasons why I hired and deployed over 80 college counselors to all middle schools and high schools is because we needed to help students navigate their path, as early as the 6th or 7th grade when they start thinking about stopping out of school. And we use the data to figure out which campuses needed that extra level of support. Because sometimes, as was alluded to earlier, students don't see the relevancy of their education until they have an adult they trust to believe in them and tell them that you have options. You have options in the Anchorage School District. Just like in Houston, students had options. So for many of our students, that meant that we, footed the bill for career exploration activities as early as 5th grade. Same thing throughout their middle school career, and telling them the importance of all the great industries you can enter after high school or after you get a college credential. A lot of jobs are what they call upskill jobs, where with a simple credential, we can get you in high school for free. You can earn a really competitive wage, which is appealing to a lot of our students. We have some very low performing campuses in Houston ISD with high dropout rates. And we asked the students and teachers and principals, why do you think that's happening? And for a lot of our students in a large metropolitan area, they found it more strategic to work so they can support their families. And we try to prevent that by offering paid internships or partnering with the community college to give some of these students work study to learn a skill or earn a certificate and get paid for it. And we saw huge dividends in it. And then, one of the reasons why we created in Houston so many early college high schools that offer workforce associate's degrees is because that's part of the strategy too when it comes to retaining students and keeping them from dropping out, because you instill that sense of relevancy in their education. They can finally see within arm's reach, I have access to a credential or a skill that's going to give me a career that pays $50,000, $60,000 off the gate. And we do this strategically before they leave our schools, because once, they're in 12th grade, sometimes it's too late. So we're trying to accelerate their career and be creative. Credit recovery, flexible models, middle colleges. I'm a huge believer, which is why we have 4 middle colleges today in Houston ISD that really meet students where they're at. And then I'll just close by saying school choice is important too, and making sure that all of our fantastic school choice options reflect the student demographics that we serve, because sometimes the right educational program can make the difference for a student trying to find relevance in their education towards their future.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hauser.
For me, the most important thing we can do to ensure that students continue to stay in school and we reduce the dropout rate is making sure that every single student, when they come into our schools, know that there's an adult in that student that cares about them and wants to make sure that they're there to help them be successful. As a principal at Service High School, when I stepped into the principal role at Service High School, attendance was a concern. The school had one of the lowest attendance rates across the high school. My primary focus that first year and every single year I was there was making sure that we connected with school or connected with our students, making sure that they knew that every single adult there was there to support them and make sure they had the resources to be successful. We focused on connecting with them from the very moment when they stepped on the bus or when they walked in the building. I'd be outside greeting them when they were walking walking in, saying hello, asking them how their day went, talking to some of our athletes, and making sure that they knew that I knew that they were in sports. I knew they were connected, and having those relationships. And that was for every single one of my staff. When they stepped on the bus driver would welcome them and make sure that they knew that every single day they were welcomed and they were supposed to be at school, and we wanted them to be at school, because we know when students attend school, they learn. And as we were, as a principal of high school, one of the things that we saw is as our attendance rate continued to grow to one of the highest attended schools in the Anchorage School District for all the comprehensive high schools, our dropout rate started to drop as well. At the end, when I left service at the end of last year, our dropout rate was 0.88, half the dropout rates of the other comprehensive high schools. We had the lowest dropout rate of all the comprehensive high schools. And I see that as a primary focus of making sure that every single adult was there to support our students and make sure that they knew that we wanted them in the school, and we were going to do everything we could to make sure that they were in school learning, and then we were providing the supports to make sure that they were learning. The other piece I think is important, as the superintendent of the Sitka School Districts, I've continued that focus on engaging and connecting with schools, connecting with the community, making sure that we're working with the community to support our students, not only out in the community, but in the schools, because it really is a community approach to ensuring that students come to school, feel supported in school, and then we have those relationships with them. In the Sitka School District, our graduation rate is almost 90%, and that's for all. We have high graduation rate for all of our student subgroups, and all of our students are doing very well with graduation. We have a 95% attendance rate, and we're seeing the successes. We routinely score higher than the state on all the statewide assessments in English language arts. And so we are seeing those successes of encouraging and retaining students and bringing them into the schools and making sure that they know that adults are there to support them. The other thing I think is really important too is making sure that we do have, a wide variety of opportunities for students, not only core classes, your language arts, social studies, math, and sciences, but elective courses, immersion courses. The Anchorage School District has a great variety, and it's probably one of the most diverse program offerings of all the districts that I've seen and worked in, talked with colleagues from. It's really amazing to see all the different opportunities we have, because we connect with students, we bring them in, and we have courses that appeal, challenge them, and make sure that they know that they're going to learn and grow and have the supports to make sure they learn and grow. And I think all those pieces come together to really focus on keeping students in school. And when they're in school, they succeed academically. And when they succeed academically, they graduate, and they have that foundational schools to be able to be successful when they post-secondary education, college, or career.
Thank you, Mr. Hauser. I just would ask, we have more questions than we'll have time for, but you get to have more if we just talk a little quicker. But thank you. Your answers are very necessary and very in-depth and most appreciative, and I know so is the community. April, your turn.
All right. Dr. Bryant, you'll be up first. Question 4 is, what is your vision for meeting the social emotional learning? Sorry about that. Okay, I'm going to start over. What is your vision for meeting the social emotional learning need of students in Anchorage School District?
Sure. One, we need to make sure that students across the district have access to high quality social emotional learning. And I have to understand what are the challenges to ensure that that's reality. Sometimes it's credentials, sometimes it's shortages of staff, or sometimes it's a lack of a vision for what effective social emotional learning looks like across all of our different schools. And that's one of the first things that I want to figure out as Anchorage superintendent. As an example, in Houston, we realized that social emotional support, along with wraparound supports, are the bedrock for academic success. You can look at a school that has low academic performance and assume it's because of teaching and instruction, but that's haphazard. That's premature, because sometimes it's because the students are food insecure, or they're homeless, or they're English language learners. And you have to dig deeper and understand what services and supports that they need in the district. And that's why we were successful in Houston at deploying 500 additional wraparound support specialists and social emotional providers to all of our campuses based on an equity-driven distribution. because we needed boots on the ground to really figure out what providers do students need. We also partnered with a technology firm to track this at the district level. So every week in cabinet, we would review the number of interactions that students would have with their wraparound service provider, and also what services were they asking for. So when you see that there's an increase in homeless support services being needed at a school, you can make sure that you're deploying more district resources or galvanizing more community partners to that end. So as superintendent, what I plan to do is to create the Anchorage vision for social emotional learning that will be comprehensive and not a luxury. You know, a lot of people, again, tend to think that it's academics versus social emotional learning. And that's simply not the case. If you're going to serve the whole child, yes, I'm going to fight to make sure that we have effective teachers in all of our classrooms. But our students have a lot of need. We're in a very diverse school system, and these are challenging times in terms of mental health as well. So we're not going to be the best people that we can be as students or as teachers unless we have access to the social emotional counseling and culturally responsive curriculum that we need moving forward.
And Mr. Hauser.
I believed it was me, so I just want to make sure. So one of the things, that I have to say, and the Anchorage School District has been a pioneer and a leader in social emotional learning. I was one of the first administrators trained in aggressors, victims, bystanders almost 16 years ago for social emotional learning. It has been something that the district has been a pioneer on, and it is one of the strengths of the district is the work that they've done with social emotional learning and the realization early on, the connection and the relationship between students' social and emotional well-being and their success in academics and in the school. It is something that I would continue to promote and work with because it is something that I've seen firsthand in ASD, but also as superintendent of the Sitka School District, the benefits that it has on supporting our students. And making sure that, as we look at other support services for social emotional learning, as was said earlier, the pandemic has been very difficult on our students, mental health and social emotional learning, and those supports that we're able to provide really are going to be foundational over the next couple of years as we continue to work with students that are struggling from not only COVID-related academic learning loss, but also some of the mental health supports and stresses that have happened as a result of the pandemic. And I think those services and those supports in the school are essential. The other piece I think is important is those partnerships that we have out in the community, making sure in the school that we have resources through counselors, through potentially some social workers coming in, or school psychologists, making sure we have those supports in place to make sure students have the resources and needs to support them, but also making sure that as we go through and we look at our students, again, every single student knows they have a trusted adult in a building that they can talk to and is there to support them and help point them in the right direction if they need any assistance. Working with the community, working with outside, a lot of times families don't understand when they need some of those supports, where those supports are. And I think one of the roles of the schools is making sure that we work with the community to identify support systems. So while we build SEL programs and supports in the school to address some of those needs, we also have scaffolding supports out in the community as well. Stone Soup Group, some of these resources that are out in the community that can provide services to families outside of school as well. So we're looking at the whole child in all of the different environments that they're at and making sure they have those supports. Other pieces, when we look at social emotional learning and try to tie, behaviors, looking at and working and providing training around trauma-informed practices for our staff and identifying and recognizing some of those, adverse childhood, situations that they've been put in. And so identifying those and working with those, as well as going through and building up some of our restorative justice. The Anchorage School District has a strong restorative justice program with, support. So if there are behavior issues stemming from, maybe some social emotional or maybe from some frustration in academic settings, making sure that we have those supports in place. So we're engaging, working with students, keeping them in the school, working and addressing as they're kind of transitioning in and out of some of these restorative justice past programs. These are all programs that are designed to be social, emotional, and connect with students and support students, not only academically, but behaviorally, and to work at keeping them in school, supporting them, and addressing their needs.
And Dr. Neal.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and step in. I'm going to use 5 to 10 seconds of my time to thank our translation services. I know we're talking fast. They're doing a great job staying up, and so I'll try to slow it down a little bit. But I just wanted to say thank you for our translation team. Like my 2 colleagues, talking about social emotional needs, social emotional program implementation, looking at the positive behavior intervention and supports, if you will, in certain districts. This is work that I've implemented in a couple different districts, and it can look a couple different ways. In the Anchorage district, one of the things that I would continue to press forward is fidelity of implementation. So amidst the schools that we went and visited with over the last 2 days, there are certain leaders and schools that are doing it in kind of to one level of fidelity, and other schools that are maybe not as aggressive or kind of structured in their approach to social emotional learning. And so whether that's restorative practice or whether that's community partnerships, I think when you look back over that implementation over those 13, 14, 15 years, what seems to be working and what is maybe not as successful. And so making sure that you're looking at things compared to a set of standards and making sure that students are getting the resources that they need. And so an example is in our current district, when surveyed, our students say that 96% of them say that they have an adult that they can trust. That's really important to take feedback, and are our students responding well to our intervention process when it comes to social emotional learning? Prior to my district that I'm in now, we developed a values-based positive behavior intervention and supports, where it was really tied to behaviors in classrooms and playgrounds and discipline matrix and discipline structures as we brought in restorative practices, and making sure that we implemented that with fidelity across all of our schools. So when a student is in elementary, they're learning the structure and the standards of positive behavior, expectations, or social emotional response. And then when they go to middle school, junior high, or they're a part of a K-8, they go to high school, those characteristics and traits are systematically applied to all of our schools, K-12. And so that we're not spending time at the elementary level with a different level of standard, and the middle school and then high school, but the language of positive behavior and appropriate student behavior is synonymous across all of our schools. And I would agree with trauma-informed practices, and I would absolutely agree with community partnerships. And again, my experience is that when parents and families don't get the basic Maslow's hierarchy of needs for food and shelter, they struggle as a family unit. So we do have partnerships in my current school, and I know Anchorage does as well, on how do we connect families during times of need and crisis to be able to, they're going to step off of the pathway for educational learning and into survival mode as a family. So making sure that we're supporting our positive behavior or social emotional learning is very much a part of that priority.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Hauser, you go first. And the question number 5 is, what is the single most important indicator of a healthy, thriving school district?
I think the single most important indicator of healthy, thriving school district is the parent involvement and the students being there and being part of the school. For me, and this really has become apparent, during the pandemic, when a lot of our schools weren't able to be accessed by, parents for, the concerns around COVID-19. One of the things I really strive for early on as superintendent is getting parents into the schools, whether it's, being part of our activities as spectators, bringing them in as volunteers. As soon as we can get them into the buildings, I was focused on that, because one of the things that you'll see is when the community and the parents and the families, they're connected to their neighborhood schools, amazing things happen. And so that's one of the things that when you look at the district and you look at, seeing how that success is, if you see a community that is supportive, you see parents that are actively involved, volunteering their time on the PTSA, coming in and helping out, making copies, and maybe coming in and, supporting, going out and doing field trips and just being part of it is such an important process for the students, not only to see their own parents there engaged or their guardians there engaged in their education, but also I think making sure that we have the opportunity for students to see other students' parents. And it just builds that community, which is so important. One of the things that we just recently finished in the Sitka School District was just one of the coolest things I've seen. It was called Discover Your Potential, where we brought in community members from around the city of Sitka. And this was parents, business partnerships. And we brought them in, and every single one of them offered a class. It was a week-long program, and they offered a class for students. And there were over about 60 classes that were offered, anywhere from hunter safety, sushi making, skateboard making. The list went on. Native Youth Olympics, feeding. And so we brought the community in, and students was such a powerful opportunity for students, not only to be learning something that was different than what they might be learning in the school and exploring a personal interest and having, cultural activities that were brought into the school to support them. But it was really cool because they had the opportunity to be taught by their peers' parents and, community members, and building those relationships. And by bringing that in, it just reinforced to me just the importance of having, and really saying a successful district really has parents in the building watching and engaged with some of the wonderful things that are going on in the school, and just right there hand in hand with their students, working hand in hand with the teachers and the building administration, and ultimately making the best district possible.
Thank you very much. Dr. Neal.
Thank you very much. Single greatest indicator of success for me is culture, and I think culture is pervasive. Depending on the school, can be pervasively positive or pervasively challenging. And so, when you walk into schools, you can tell very quickly what the culture of that school represents. I was recently appointed by the State Board of Education in Colorado as an evaluator of turnaround schools, and so schools that are on corrective action, schools that are in the process of learning, how to become a better school. And as well as, speaking on this topic across the United States, when you walk into a school, you can feel it's communication, it's a community connected through communication. It's a building of trust. Teachers are excited and ready to come into school. Students are excited and ready to come in. It's a data-focused school where we're looking at student data and student achievement. All of those are factors in the culture that is oftentimes is led by the leader, but good leaders with good collaborative teachers and partnerships with educators lead great schools. I've seen some of the lowest performing schools improve student achievement because they began focusing on the culture of the school. And yes, that absolutely can include parents and making sure that students in a post-COVID world are getting to class. But that also includes a much greater synergy among staff. And are our staff healthy and well? Are our staff, and a lot of our schools right now, our staff are tired. And we're coming out of this post-COVID world and making sure. We were at a school today and they had 10-minute massage chairs for the teachers to kind of regroup and come around. That's about culture, and it's not something you can measure. All the time. Absolutely, there are measures of student achievement and academic progress and growth from MAP and STAR and DIBELS and other academic measures. But it's also about staff turnover. It's also about staff willingness to stay the long haul when it comes to changing and improving student achievement. It's also about students' willingness to adopt their own or address their own learning loss. And so all of that is about the culture of each school. And if you spend time in a lot of schools, you can find it. Classroom doors are open versus classroom doors that are closed, or students that are welcoming and ready to see visitors. That's all about culture. And I think great leaders do this really, really well. And I think our job, or my job as a superintendent, is to increase that capacity and aptitude of our leaders and staff to build the culture of the Anchorage School District.
Thank you, Dr. Neal. Dr. Bryant.
From my lens, I would say one way that you can tell that a school system is in a healthy state is a sense of optimism across all of the different stakeholders, especially those who comprise the Anchorage School District, because we all see the world through so many different lenses and perspectives. But if across all of those different stakeholders, we have an optimism for the education of our children, that's everything. So when I think about what that looks like from the parent perspective, they have a trust that if they put their child in an Anchorage school, that they have the world ahead of them when it comes to them having access to a college education or a career in a high wage, high demand job. And they want to keep their students in that system at all costs. From the student perspective, you also will have that same trust that my school district has my back and they're willing to invest in my education and ensure that we have talented educators in my classroom who are going to be there for me, including when I'm in a state where I feel that the world is uncertain and maybe I'm going through mental issues or maybe I'm going through a rough patch. I know that within my school is a home where I can lean on all sorts of people who are my village, who are going to help me succeed. When I think about that culture of optimism through the lens of a teacher or a staff member, it's a place where I know that if I make a promise to work for Anchorage School District, that they also have my back, and I can be optimistic that they're going to make sure that I have the materials and professional development that I need to either grow as an educator or to even get the skill sets and resources that I need to pursue a different career within the Anchorage School District. They're really thinking long-term about my lifetime as an educator in this district, and I'm going to trust the decisions that are made, even if I don't immediately agree with them. And I think a lot, being someone who works for a large, complicated urban school system, the trust of the community and what that looks like and feels like and sounds like. I think that when you have a community that has a trust and an optimism for the state of education in a place like Anchorage, that's going to go a long way when it comes to making decisions. If you don't have that trust or an optimism for the future, then you're going to have pushback on every single thing that you try to achieve or innovate within the school system. But when you're in a situation where you've built that trust and that relationship and that hope for the future, you'll find more often than not that people are willing to give you the benefit of the doubt and to still have robust, healthy, and respectful dialogue. But they understand that ultimately the school district has the best interests of all of Anchorage in mind. And of course, it's a place where students love learning for the sake of learning. And they have a trust that what they're receiving in school is going to equip them with all the tools in their toolbox to succeed in college, career, life, and beyond as global citizens in an ever-changing world.
Thank you.
Question 6. What specific talent can you bring to Anchorage that will not only improve education for Anchorage children, but will benefit the education community, particularly teachers, and create trust and confidence in the community? Dr. Neal, you'll be first.
Thank you. This interview process is always about talking about skills and traits, and you kind of go down the list and try to figure out which is the best. I think over time, I've learned a lot better on how to be a good listener. And that's really a character trait that takes energy and effort to sit back and observe, to pay attention, and to not be about my ideas, but to be about the collaborative approach to what we're doing as a school district. I think early on as a superintendent, I would come in and I'd really have a strong idea and want to move that idea forward. And I learned through the process that it's, again, being a part of a village of leaders and teachers and staff takes listening and taking time to be collaborative. I call it spiraling, where I'm bouncing ideas off our principals and our leaders. I'm bouncing ideas off of, I have a teacher leader academy that meets on Wednesday afternoons, and we go through and we do a book study, and I've got resourced questions that I need feedback on. And so that listening process, we tomorrow evening, I have a district-wide meeting to hear parent feedback. And so if that active listening, being ready to take those strategies and collaborate and build trust through that, that's the skill that is not an overnight skill. It's something that comes out of years of practice of having both the passion, the direction, the strategy, the backbone, the push, to get up early and get it done, but not in the wrong direction. Making sure that I'm taking the time to collaborate and connect with the variety of stakeholders across the organization, listening to students, having students at our school board meetings, having students on a student advisory council to the superintendent. These are all things that I've done in the past that really help me navigate the direction of where I need to go as a leader. Having trusted advisors of principals that have been here and leaders that have been here a lot longer than I have. And so that need of connection and feedback is important. Part of that is making investment in other people so that they're willing to make investment back. I mean, there's just kind of this quid pro quo that happens in leadership where I have to spend the time giving and spending my time in schools and spending my time with teachers and leaders and supporting our unions and supporting our staff so that they in return, when it comes time, are willing to partner with me and walk the journey. And so that's a lot of the skill that I think that is needed, or a talent that's needed in executive leadership as a superintendent, that happens over really years of practice and getting better each year at doing what we do as leaders.
Thank you, Dr. Neal. Dr. Bryant?
I would say first off, I'm a system level thinker. I like thinking about how all the dots intersect and connect across all the different aspects that make a school system great. I've worked in Houston for as long as I have, which is approaching over 11 years, because I am truly captivated by this passion of not just improving a school, but really elevating a city or really elevating a state. That's really important to me because when you're able to do that, you can break cycles of poverty. You can change people's perspective on what's possible and change paradigms. And my goal as a leader is to change hearts and minds. You know, one of my earliest experiences doing that was when I led a program that helps low-income students go to top colleges on full scholarships. And I launched that initiative in 45 different high schools all across the city. And some of the naysayers would say, well, we don't really need that program in all schools, because there was an inherent assumption that maybe not all students at all schools need to be at a selective college on a full ride scholarship. So I was really proud of the fact that I've sent thousands of students from every single high school and every single community to Harvards and Stanfords and Rices and Lewis and Clarks of the world on full rides where they're graduating at rates of 94+%. I truly believe in change, and I know that it can happen across different communities, across different languages, across different life perspectives. And I think that's something that's going to be a direct benefit to a place like Anchorage, which is also one of the most diverse school systems in the country that serves a lot of students. I come to the table, unlike a lot of individuals, where I've led in the academics world. Like, I know curriculum and instruction. I used to be a high school math curriculum writer. I know what it takes for students to get college credit. I've had that hat. I've had the innovation hat where I've thought about things across the finance realm, across school choice and legislation and policy. But then most recently, I've been leading human capital for a very large public employer where I'm thinking about the employee experience and what it takes to bring in and keep world-class educators. And I really understand how all the different dots connect. And of course, school leadership. How do you motivate and train and inspire people to step up to the plate to be effective school leaders? And how do we as a school system measure that? I really think about things across big systems, and I want to keep on doing that my whole career. And I would say that I'm also characterized by a sense of optimism and hope. I want to be here in Anchorage specifically because I just see, as I mentioned, the data shows we just have so far that we can go. Our kids have so far that they can go, and I just truly believe that they can all get there. And when we elevate Anchorage, we can literally elevate the whole state. I think people forget that here in Anchorage, we're educating over 30% of all the school children in the state of Alaska. So literally, if I, as superintendent, can help close the achievement gap for some of our students, we're literally creating a world of difference for the entire state of Alaska, and other people are going to look to Alaska as the leader in urban education. That's my passion. I did it in Houston, and I really want to do it in a very different community like Anchorage for a very long time.
For me, the talents that I think I bring to the position is my unwavering support of students and staff. To me, it all comes back to making sure that our students and our staff have the resources and the supports they need to be successful. And part of that, ties with the talents of I've worked and know the Anchorage School District. I've been a Alaskan almost my whole life, and I know the school system. I know the foundation of how we fund the school system. And I think when I look at the talents that I would bring to the Anchorage School District Superintendency is a complete understanding and a breakdown of how the district works and how funding works in the state of Alaska, and being able to utilize that knowledge and that experience. I've advocated down in Juneau for over 7 years, and there are legislators on both sides of the aisle that contact me with specific questions about how a specific bill might impact my school or my district. And those relationships take time to cultivate and build and develop. And one of the things I would bring in, and the talents I have, is that ability to actually have that collaborative process, work with people, talk with people, listen to people, bring people into the conversation, and really, like I said, ultimately advocating and being focused 100% on our students and making sure the students have everything they need. And that, again, ties to staff as well. And so that talent of bringing people together, working with, building that trust, building that commitment from all the stakeholders, and then really focusing on, once we get those people together, once we have those conversations, making sure that as we have that focus, what are our goals, what are our objectives, what are our mission, and making sure that we all come together with that common vision, common goal, and we have that one purpose, which is focusing on meeting students' needs, making sure that they're successful, making sure that they have all the skills needed. So when they graduate from high school, whether they're going into a career, whether they're going to college, whatever that might be, we know that we've done everything we can to support them and give them all those skills that they need to have to move forward. In my experience, my understanding of Alaska, my ability to work with and collaborate and connect with individuals, my knowledge of how foundation funding works in the state of Alaska, and working with legislators, working with assembly members to ensure that we have adequate funding for our schools as well, will only go towards building and improving education, not only for the Anchorage School District, which as a superintendent, that would be my first and foremost priority, but also looking at and advocating for, the state and public education across the state. Those are the skills. That's the talent that I would bring to this position, is that focus on students and doing everything I can 100% of the time to make sure we're meeting those students' needs.
Thank you very much. We have about 22 minutes left. I would urge us to try to get through at least 4 more questions, because it does provide you with an opportunity to share in very different areas all your marvelous experiences, and also for the sake of our community, you gave us so many questions to try to cover as many as possible. So thank you for your respect to this. Next question, which kind of changes gears from where we've been. What role will you play in guiding the development and maintenance of school facilities to ensure educational programs are adequately supported, as well as building, I will start again. What role will you play in guiding the development and maintenance of school facilities to ensure that educational programs are adequately supported, as well as the buildings, and that they are cost efficient? We'll start with Dr. Bryant.
Sure, great question. When you lead a large school system, you have to consider all the different dimensions of a school system. And a very important one that goes under the radar sometimes is business operations, the facilities. And I think about this from a number of different dimensions. One of them would be our staffing, making sure that we have incredible staff members here who are maintaining our infrastructure that we currently have. I think that when you have a safe and welcoming school environment, that directly impacts student achievement. And if you're having trouble finding those staff members, we really need to think outside the box to get them here. That's why I increased the minimum wage in Houston ISD from $14 to $15 an hour in 3 years, because we realized that there was a gap and we needed people to maintain and be excited about working a long career in Houston ISD. But then I also think about it through the lens of a bond. So thinking about the upcoming proposition and thinking about how that's going to inform our approach for bonds in future years, to make sure that some of our schools in Anchorage, some of which haven't been renovated since the late 1990s, are world-class educational facilities. And we need to create a strategic plan for what our strategy is when it comes to bonds and funding like that moving forward. And then lastly, thinking about how to strategically reallocate our funding sources. We're in a very lucky moment where we have a lot of funding from the federal government, that's one time. And I think what a lot of people forget is that there's a lot of value in one-time funding, like a federal grant like that, because that's the perfect time to invest in our HVAC systems, in our facilities and infrastructure, while we wait out our next round of bond funding that could also facilitate better infrastructure. So you have my commitment as superintendent to think about the long range plan, not just the upcoming bond vote, but thinking about the strategy for which schools are going to be next in the queue and making sure that we have the right staff to execute that vision.
I think an important piece that a lot of people don't realize, the role the superintendent has not only the academic side, but the operation side, which is that facilities and maintenance. As a superintendent of the Sitka School District, I work directly with the maintenance supervisor on ensuring that our facilities are up to date, have the resources, heating's working, all those pieces that come into play. And, that is something I have been directly working with and responsible for, as a superintendent. I think one of the pieces that's really important as we step back and we look at ensuring that we have a facility that meets the needs, not only, from a, structural standpoint, but from a technology standpoint, it's making sure that we have that plan in place. Looking at and going through the capital improvement plan, identifying and working with the state to identify, what are our capital improvement projects, and making sure that we have that list in place submitted to the state. So if we are lucky enough to be able to have access to some funding through the capital and improvement plan, we're able to get those and have those projects ready to go. Looking at, and one of the big concerns that I actually have, and I saw this both in Anchorage as an administrator in Anchorage, but also as a superintendent of the Sitka School District, is some of the deferred maintenance that has to take place, and being able to step back and make sure that when we have deferred maintenance and some of the resources and the funds that go towards that, whether it's from the state, whether it's from the local general fund or other local funds, being able to step back and make sure that we're be able to tell that story, that these deferred maintenance, if we continue to defer this maintenance, the cost is only going to go up and the need is only going to get higher. Because as we put these things off, making sure you have a plan in place to thoughtfully and fiscally address them as you're going through the process. And I think one of the pieces that, I really have been advocating for too is, we used to have, and there's been a hold on bond debt reimbursement. And one of the things that I've been advocating for down in Juneau is making sure that we are able to get bond debt reimbursement back on there. And so when districts are able to bond out, there is reimbursement from the state, which only increases the money coming back in that can go back into the classrooms to support our students. And so being able to look at all the pieces, being strategic about the, capital improvement plans that you're putting together for your buildings, and making sure you're thoughtful with, do we need a new boiler that's more energy efficient to, be more cost effective? Can we make some adjustments to, some of our lighting systems to put LED lights in to make sure that we're being not only energy efficient, but again, cost effective? All these pieces come together to ultimately come back and make sure you have facilities that has and it lives up to the quality and expectation of the, space that we want our students to learn in, and being able to support our maintenance staff who work behind the scenes and don't always get the recognition that they should, to be able to say, that is such an important part to make sure that instruction takes place, is, making sure that everyone that's working in the district, not only teachers, our paraprofessionals, but even our maintenance staff and facilities, that they understand that we value what they do to make sure that learning takes place and our students and our staff have the supports they need to make sure that they're able to, get that academic goals and missions of the district accomplished. And so those are some of the things that when I look at an experience I have in working with developing maintenance and school facilities.
Thank you very much. Dr. Neal.
Yes. When I look at it back at the history that I've had in both Denver public schools as well as two other school districts building schools, I built 9 schools over my career, helping both the visioning process as well as looking at the academic resources, the needs. Those projects don't start out of a kind of a group of people sitting together at a table. Those conversations start at a community level. And one of the things, and I know that Anchorage does this and that we have some of this in place, is making sure that we have a facilities master plan, that we've gone through the process of gathering community feedback on what programmatic needs are important, what academic supports are in place, and those that need to be supplemented. The reality is that with the bond that's coming up in the next few days, And best wishes to all of the folks that have gone through the effort and to the Anchorage School District through that process. As you look at that bond, are those needs being met that are really academically advantageous? Safety and security, building a school, those are important needs, but we currently serve 21,000 meals a day in the Anchorage School District. We transport 24,000 students twice daily in our bus service, and so our transportation resources. And as my colleagues have said, those are a lot of hard-working staff that are going above and beyond to support the needs of our students. Does our facilities master plan, our strategic thinking, do we set ourselves up for that plan? And so as I've done that in the past, it's making sure that we've got a current status, a current update on where we want to be, and building and scaffolding our resources towards that. If you've never gone through a bond election, or if you've never failed a bond election, and I've gone through several that were not successful, and we had to go back to the drawing board and say, all right, what is the best thing for this community? When we had $20 million in the state reallocated here at Anchorage back to the district, that's incredibly painful to go through that process. And I understand financially that with a $549 million budget, that 85% of those monies are going towards salaries, which I think is great, 85.5%, I think. But when we look at the deficit that's coming in the next few years between $65 and $75 million, we do have a funding cliff that we have to plan for. And so we have to strategically think about what are our priorities and how do those align to the goals of the board, as well as the strategic vision of the district, and how do we set apart a community-wide discussion on programmatic supports. Superintendent's job is really to build that bridge between parents and families and the board, and parents and families and the academic needs of the district. So I need to make sure that as a superintendent that I'm leaving space for those discussions, strategically planning for that, and then having the hard discussions of which programs are most ardently or most importantly needed. And that's the exciting work and challenging work here in the Anchorage School District.
April.
Thank you. All right, so question 8. Why are you the best person for this job? And are your coworkers from your current place of employment sorry you are leaving? Mr. Hauser.
I think one of the reasons why I'm the best candidate for this position is, again, I have deep ties to the Anchorage School District and the Anchorage community. I've been a part of the Anchorage School District for 23 years. I have a lot of relationships that go back over 2 decades. I would be able on day one to start building those building those connections and starting and knowing what are the next steps to make sure we're meeting the student needs. The other thing that I think that makes me a strong candidate is my past experience in not only in the district, but also as a current sitting superintendent in the state of Alaska. My understanding of the budgeting process in the state of Alaska, my understanding of the Anchorage School District budget, as well as, how we go out and the foundation formula and, funding works. In addition, the relationships I have down in Juneau and working with the legislators and building those relationships to support public education, to advocate for public education. And so all those pieces come together to really give me a unique insight into, how the Anchorage School District runs and how to, on day one, be able to hit the ground running with, meeting students' needs, supporting the teachers, making sure that I'm working with a community that I have connection with, that I know very well. And that is one of the things that I think makes me one of the strong candidates. Why that is. Edie, would you mind finishing the last bit of that question too? Sorry about that.
The last part was, are your coworkers from your current place of employment sorry you are leaving?
Yes, they are. Thank you for reading that for me. Yes, they are. I've actually been getting a couple of texts that are actually pretty funny about, congratulations, wish you the well, and really excited for me. But then they end with, we hope you don't get it because we don't want you to leave us. And so it makes me feel really good, the support that they've had, not only the school board, which really has been a fantastic school board for me down in the Sitka area, but also the coworkers have been really supportive and really friendly and really funny too. They've been able to have some good laughs, through this too. But I've really appreciated it and enjoyed, hearing from them.
Thank you. Dr. Neal.
Sure. I actually will reverse that question. And the humor of being in two places at once has been just really evident. I had a couple text messages early on in this call where staff are encouraging and rooting actually on this phone call down in Colorado and watching. And so I have a great school board that has been supportive of this process. Our board president came out in the news last night, and encouraging me to stay. And so there's just a process. And social media and all of this makes this interview process different. So I do believe I will miss them. They will miss me. And my current district has been very supportive of this journey. Past experience. I have a lot of diversity in my background, both from a business operations side and the academic, having, kind of credentials as well as real life experience, building schools, innovating schools, working with many cultures, multiple cultures in the same environment, multiple languages, living as in a minority and working in a minority and majority district, working in a small, medium, and even large districts like Denver Public Schools. That experience takes time, and I think the diversity of experience, I think, is a real asset to stepping into a leadership role. Being a lecturer at the University of Colorado, being an advocate for turnaround and appointed by the State Board of Education. The academic side of credentials from Harvard University and University of Southern California, the book knowledge theory side, as well as just the application. We called a snow day 2 weeks ago at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning in Colorado, and getting in my truck and driving around and visiting with our facilities team and making the decision about the real life experience. Do we cancel school or not? That takes some time to be a part of the community and learning that, but also takes a time to think about the way that you lead. And I have that experience, learned a lot through the colleagues and mentors and support teams that I've been able to work with in my current district and others. And I really feel that experience is a great match for the future of the Anchorage School District.
And for myself, I'll say that I'm somebody who can get things done, and I can get things done in a large, complex school system with a lot of different stakeholders and a lot of moving parts and pieces for large schools, small schools, early college schools, IB schools, and for many different demographics, from many different cultures. And that's why I want to be here in Anchorage. Some of the things that I've led, for example, was leading advanced placement scores more than 8 percentage points since when I began leading it, sending thousands of more students to highly selective colleges on full scholarships and ensuring that they graduate from college at rates of 90% or above, increasing application rates for financial aid by thousands each year, putting counselors in all of our high schools, middle schools, and even some elementary schools at the 5th grade level, opening 20 more international baccalaureate programs across all the cities so that no matter where you live in the city of Houston, you have access to a K-12 global education outside of your backyard, and increasing IB scores and performance by 30%, including for a lot of students that are economically disadvantaged. I really understand what it takes to succeed in an environment where there are a lot of different opinions and stakeholders. And I've had a lot of success in that regard. And I've also expanded opportunity and access by being one of the first districts in the country to pay for AP exams and dual credit tuition and IB exams, no matter what your income is, which led to thousands of more minority students getting passing scores. They had the potential, they just didn't have the access. I believe in all kids. Number two, I'm the best candidate because I urgently want to be here too, and I want to be here for a long time. I'm not going to hide the fact that I have a long career ahead of me, and that means that I have many years to contribute to the journey of Anchorage, because we're not going to close the achievement gap overnight, and I want continuity and leadership over a long time to get us there. And then lastly, will my coworkers and colleagues and everyone miss me? In some ways, yes. I think my superintendent will miss me in the sense that I'm leading one of his 5 priorities that I helped him identify as he onboarded from a new system, because he trusted me and promoted me to my role. But I would say in some ways, no. I think a lot of people are not going to miss you because they've been preparing me for this moment. One of the reasons why I was appointed an assistant superintendent for Houston at the age of 25, and one of the reasons why I've been over so many departments over the course of my career, including human capital when I don't have an HR background, is because from day one, people have believed in me. And they've put themselves out there for me and have given me opportunities to be ready to be the best superintendent that Anchorage deserves in this very uncertain time that we're in. So my entire career has led up to this moment. So in some ways, they're going to be very happy for me because they've ensured that I'm ready for this moment and this time.
Thank you. Thanks to all three of you. Gentlemen, this is your last question, and we're getting close to the time of conclusion, so I will ask you to stay within the 2-minute time frame because we have a few announcements at the end for the community. And April, just so you know, because we couldn't get to them all, I'm going to jump to a question that I feel is indicative of a big segment of this audience because it's both community and parents. So this is very much directed at parents, or came from parents directly. So your last question, and we are starting with Dr. Bryant. Last question. How do you see the role of parents in shaping ASD's educational priorities?
That's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it because parents have a big stake in our education, and Anchorage is a place with so many different options and so many different types of schools, and we need to empower them to have choice in their education and to be a part of every step of their students' educational journey. They put a lot of trust in us to ensure we have the best educators in our classrooms, that our buses show up on time, that we're investing our scarce dollars in the right priorities. And I want to make sure that my decisions are informed by their voices. And that's something I've done in Houston through a lot of ways by, really investing in family engagement when it comes to all the different initiatives that I've discussed previously. But I don't take for granted the fact that parents put a lot of trust when they choose to put their children in Anchorage versus another option that they might be considering, whether it's within a private school or outside of Anchorage. And I'm not going to take that for granted. And I'm going to make sure that they're a part of that process because they're an important stakeholder too. And then I'll close by saying that not only am I the type of superintendent that listens to the parents that are coming to the board meetings or emailing me or, reaching out and asking for help. And I'm not only working to serve the parents that come to my family engagement events and that sort of thing, or fill out the surveys, but I'm also here for that parent that maybe doesn't participate in any of those things for very valid reasons, because maybe they don't feel that they have the tools or social capital to come to a board meeting or to write an email to me or to participate in a survey. Maybe they need a leader who's willing to meet them where they're at and go to their schools or their coffee shop or their church or community gathering place of choice and hear from me directly that I value you, even if I'm not hearing from you, because all stakeholders deserve a voice in the educational program of our students.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hauser.
For me, over the 24 years I've been in education, parents have been essential for me to ensuring the success of our students' education. From my very first time as a teacher and working and collaborating and calling parents and having them come in to support with some of my music programs, all the way to the work that I'm doing in the Sitka School District, the development of the strategic plan for the Sitka School District, and bringing parents in and hearing from parents and having them part of that process of shaping the next stage of the Sitka School District through the goals, the mission, the whole part of education, making sure parents have that voice and they're an active part of their students' education is really key for me. Being able to bring parents into the school. I mean, you've heard some of my responses. I have always valued that, having parents in working and being part of their students' education, collaborating and working with teachers to make sure that they have the supports, but also I think making sure that they know that they can reach out to me, contact me anytime, and I'm going to be responsive to them. I want to make sure that I hear from them. We work collaboratively together, and then I actually hear what they have to say, and not just listen, but hear what they have to say and make active change and support them and support their students. bringing parents in, as I said early on, is one of the signs of, making sure that they're engaged in the school, and it actually helps with the students' academic success as well, and wanting to make sure that we're part of this academic journey of their students together. And so for me, making sure that they are part and we collaborate together, and then that voice, that very important voice, is really something that I will strive to continue to bring in through PTSA, through relationships outside in activities and sports, and just having one-on-one conversations with parents, working with the community, partnerships. All of those pieces are things that our parents are involved in and have that voice, and bringing them into the schools and going out and making them part of this is so important. It's something that I absolutely see as essential and will continue to do moving forward in my career.
I'll be brief in the remaining 3 minutes that we have. I will be one of those parents. My wife and I had kids late in life, and so actually having my own children in our system it's part of the journey for the Neal family, and that means PTA conferences, being both a dad as well as a superintendent, and that's important. I've experienced my kids in my schools now for more than a decade, and that's part of the journey of connecting with families and parents. The parent collaborative in the classroom, and helping, in the past I've launched volunteer, engagement programs where all parents felt increasingly important and increasingly engaged in our classrooms, and making sure there's a place in our classrooms for parents to be engaged with. Working with our teachers and staff on communicating through syllabi and through regular communications with parents to help them understand what the educational progress is. Prior to COVID, we didn't have that engagement factor the same as really what we do now. Parents are really engaged in what their students are learning, and they've watched the progress of their students over the last 2 years. We need to continue to perpetuate and grow that. And so helping our parents stay abreast and stay aware of where we're headed, and letting our teachers partner in the parent, teacher, student collaborative. It's really a parent voice is that of a student voice. And when I can get closer to student voice and what our students need and what our students are passions and desires and what our students want to learn through our parent conversations, that's a very successful equation that I've been a part of in the past, and I would continue to like to bring to the Anchorage School District. Parents are really the receiving party, and they need to be a part of the strategic planning, and all of those are part of the parent engagement factor in the community like Anchorage, as well as Denver and other districts that I've been with in the past for the last 20 years. Parents continue to be at my table asking for help and engagement and asking to be a partner in the educational process. I continue to encourage that and look forward to that opportunity here in the Anchorage School District.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Everybody in the audience, I would like you to all join me in thanking these three outstanding educators for not only the time they've shared with you in the last hour and a half, but for what they've done all the way through this process, and the last 2 days where it has been very rigorous and arduous. Congratulations on a job well done on all three screens, as I would say. Extremely well done, and join me in congratulating and telling them sincerely, thank you for sharing your educational expertise, and most importantly, your heartfelt interest in Anchorage SD. Couple of closing statements, if I may. First of all, I want to thank the hundreds of persons involved in this process just over the past 2 days. They've been staff, they've been constituent groups, and a prime example is led by April and the leadership Anchorage team, because they've been part of that constituent group from the beginning all the way to here. And they are just one example of the number of groups in this community that not only have great caring for the district, but actually roll up their sleeves and work to help the district. And then I really want to thank students. We had marvelous engagements yesterday morning with different student groups in complete classrooms where these three gentlemen spoke to them and answered questions to them. And I really want to highlight one, and that's Ms. Ellie Shaw, who's an upper class woman in one of the high schools. She is the president of the Student Advisory Council. That's 60 students that I had an opportunity to meet with about 6 weeks ago, and they are phenomenal. But that student engagement, Ms. Shaw is a prime example of what kind of student leadership can be built out of the Anchorage School District. And she is also the student advisor to the school board. And so she actually spends time as a school board member. One example of the great successes of students in Anchorage. And in closing, I really want to thank this audience. the 100 plus of you that have been with us. I want to thank you for not only your attendance, but most significantly for you being part of this group that submitted over in total from all the different groups, just short of 500 questions that we worked with to get down to questions from each of the groups. I applaud that kind of participation and thank you. They're so well thought out. And also, I want to give one more reminder. Please go to the school district website. Please click on the icon that says search. You'll see these three gentlemen's picture. Please click on to the comments and then please fill out those impression forms. You have till noon tomorrow to get this done. And then our team at Ray & Associates, we will tally this and so forth for the board because we need to get them to them by Thursday. So please join in making your participation not only as an audience, but as a participant. And then I'd just like to share one anticipated set of next steps so you're all aware. From this point on, that given the time for board deliberations and the contract discussions with the successful candidate, it's expected that the board will announce its decision within the next 10 days. Again, thank you all. April, I think Ellie, you're on there. Thank you so much for all your help with the whole student group, but really a special thank you to these three outstanding educators for the great work you've done. Your school board is absolutely not only thrilled to have you, but is thrilled with this community and your level of participation that made their hope and their commitment to community engagement in the search process a reality. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening and have a great rest of the school year. It's a pleasure to be with you. Be well and be safe.